Before democracy, before science, before the Roman legions marched across Europe, there were the Greeks. They asked the questions no one dared to ask. What is truth? What is justice? What is the soul? They built temples for gods who resembled men, wrote tragedies that still move us, and gave us words we still use today. Politics, philosophy, theater, cosmos. But behind the beauty was brutality. Rival cities at war, tyrants, plagues, betrayals. A civilization that gave birth to freedom, yet relied on slavery. From the myths of Olympus to the conquests of Alexander, from the Minoan ruins to the fires of Athens. The story of Greece is one of brilliance and blood. This is not just history, this is the legacy of who we are. Welcome to Echoes of the Ancient. This is the story of the Greeks. Long before the glory of Athens, before Sparta trained warriors, two great civilizations rose from the Aegean. The first lived on an island, Crete, the Minoans, masters of the sea, traders of exotic goods, and builders of palaces so vast, some believe they inspired the myth of Atlantis. Their greatest city was Knossos, a labyrinth of halls, staircases, and frescoes. They had no walls, no armies, just art, peace, and worship of the mother goddess. But around 1450 BC, it all changed. A cataclysm. Some say it was a volcanic eruption. Others blame invaders from the north. Either way, the Minoans fell, and from their ashes a new power rose. The Mycenaeans, fierce, militaristic, and obsessed with honor, gold, and glory. Their kings built tombs the size of fortresses. Their soldiers carved lions into stone gates, and their stories became legends. Agamemnon, Achilles, Troy. These names, once myth, were born from the Mycenaeans. Around 1200 BC, they too vanished. Cities burned, palaces collapsed, writing disappeared. Greece entered a dark age for nearly 400 years. Silence, but the memory of the Mycenaeans endured, passed in poems and oral tales, until one day they were written down, the Iliad, the Odyssey. These ancient foundations shaped what Greece would become, a land of warriors, poets, and gods. In the next chapter, we meet those gods and the myths that ruled the Greek imagination. The Greeks did not just believe in gods, they lived among them. To the Greeks, the divine was everywhere. In the sea's rage, in the flicker of fire, in the heart of war, and in the whisper of dreams. Atop Mount Olympus, 12 gods ruled the world. Zeus, the king of the sky and thunder. Hera, the jealous queen of marriage. Poseidon, who shook the earth with his trident. Athena, born from Zeus's head, goddess of wisdom and war. Apollo, god of music and prophecy. Artemis, huntress of the wild. Ares, the brutal god of war. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, born from sea foam. They weren't perfect. They lied. They cheated. They fell in love. And they punished anyone who disrespected their power. Every city had a patron god. Athens belonged to Athena. Sparta honored Ares. Delphi was the domain of Apollo, home to the oracle whose riddles shaped destinies. Temples were built like homes for the gods. Priests and priestesses offered wine, oil, and sacrifice. Rituals marked every birth, marriage, and death. And in the middle of it all, myth. Stories passed from poet to poet, carved into stone, painted on pottery. Myths that explained why the seasons changed, why men fell in love, why war was eternal, and why humans could never escape fate. These were not fairy tales. They were belief systems, cultural mirrors, tools for teaching morality, power, and fear. And yet, even in these wild tales, the Greeks questioned, was Zeus truly just? Could men defy prophecy? Was fate stronger than the gods? In asking these questions, The Greeks planted the seeds of something even greater: philosophy. But before logic could rise, war would dominate. In the next chapter, we return to Earth, to the fields of Marathon and the warriors of Sparta. Greece was not a nation. It was a collection of rivals. Dozens of city-states called polis scattered across mountains and islands. Each was fiercely independent. Each had its own laws, army, currency, and gods. But two cities stood above them all: Athens and Sparta. Athens, the birthplace of ideas. Athens began as a modest port city, but over time it became the heart of art, architecture, and free thought. Its people built the Acropolis, crowned by the Parthenon. They debated in the Agora, passed laws in assemblies, and honored Athena above all. Democracy was born here, not perfect, but revolutionary. Citizens could vote, speak, challenge their leaders, unless you were a woman, a slave, or a foreigner. Then your voice was silent. Athens became the cultural beacon of the Greek world, home to playwrights, sculptors, philosophers, and visionaries. Sparta, the military machine. To the south, a different city rose, one with no tolerance for weakness: Sparta. Built inland and guarded by mountains, Sparta was a society forged by war. Boys left home at age 7 to train. They slept on straw, stole food to survive, and were beaten to toughen their will. Freedom? Not in Sparta. Law ruled all, and the greatest honor was to die in battle. Women in Sparta were strong, respected, and trained in discipline, unusual for the ancient world. They raised warriors. They managed estates, but always in service of the state. Athens and Sparta represented two sides of Greece: mind and muscle, democracy and discipline, debate and obedience. And yet, despite their differences, both shared a fierce pride in being Greek. When threatened, they would unite, briefly, against foreign enemies. In the next chapter, those enemies arrive. Persia marches west. The cities prepare for war, and the fate of Greece hangs in the balance. In the early 5th century BC, a storm approached from the east. The Persian Empire, the largest the world had ever seen, set its sights on the tiny, fractured city-states of Greece. Led by Darius the Great, then Xerxes, the Persians demanded submission. Some cities bowed, but Athens and Sparta refused. And so began a war that would shape the future of the West. In 490 BC, Darius launched his fleet across the Aegean. On the plains of Marathon, 25,000 Persians met just 10,000 Athenians. The odds were impossible, but the Athenians used strategy, speed, and discipline. They charged the Persian flanks, breaking their formation. Victory was swift and stunning. A messenger ran 26 miles to Athens to deliver the news, and then collapsed and died. That run would inspire the modern marathon. A decade later, Darius's son Xerxes returned with vengeance. Over 100,000 Persian soldiers marched into Greece. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, they met resistance. 300 Spartans and a few thousand allies held the line. Outnumbered, they fought for 3 days. And when betrayed, they chose death over retreat. Their sacrifice became legend. While the Persians ravaged Athens, the Greeks prepared a naval trap. In the Straits of Salamis, the Athenian fleet lured the massive Persian ships into narrow waters. The Greek triremes, smaller and faster, struck hard. The Persian navy shattered. Xerxes fled. The war was not just about territory. It was a fight for identity, for freedom, for the right to govern themselves. Greece had stood against empire and won. But unity was temporary. In victory, Athens rose in pride and power. Sparta grew wary, and soon, the two greatest cities would turn on each other. In the next chapter, we enter Greece's most brilliant, but most fragile era, the Golden Age of Athens. After defeating Persia, Athens didn't just rebuild, it soared. The 5th century BC became Greece's most brilliant chapter, a time when art, intellect, and architecture flourished together. This was the golden age of Athens. Led by the visionary statesman Pericles, Athens transformed into a cultural powerhouse. Atop the Acropolis, Athens built the Parthenon, a temple of perfect proportions dedicated to Athena. Marble columns reached the heavens. Sculptures breathed life into stone. Public squares buzzed with citizens, artists, merchants, and philosophers. Murals and statues celebrated not just gods, but man himself. Athens became the beating heart of the Greek world. On the stage, playwrights like Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes told stories of gods, war, betrayal, and human weakness. They invented tragedy and comedy and turned myth into moral mirror. In the agora, men debated justice, virtue, and the nature of reality. Socrates asked questions no one dared to answer. His student, Plato, would write them down, and Aristotle, Plato's student, would shape the very foundation of Western thought. Democracy matured, though imperfectly. Only male citizens could vote. Women, slaves, and foreigners remained voiceless. But for the first time in history, power was shared by the many, not held by a king. Yet, beneath the marble and music, pride grew. Athens taxed its allies through the Delian League, turning a defensive alliance into an empire. Other city-states grew resentful, especially Sparta. Athens believed it could lead all of Greece, but it was blind to its own flaws. It had mastered ideas, art, and politics, but it could not master itself. In the next chapter, brilliance gives way to destruction. The greatest war Greeks ever fought was against each other. The Peloponnesian War begins. The greatest threat to Greece did not come from Persia. It came from within. Two titans, Athens and Sparta, locked in a brutal civil war that lasted nearly 30 years. This was the Peloponnesian War, a war of strategy and siege, of plague and betrayal, of pride turned to ruin. After the Persian Wars, Athens became powerful, too powerful. It used its fleet in the Delian League to control other city-states. Sparta and its allies feared that Athens sought empire. In 431 BC, war erupted. Athens had ships, Sparta had warriors. What followed was a long, grinding struggle that shattered the Greek world. Pericles ordered Athenians to retreat behind city walls. But then, disaster. A plague swept through the crowded streets. Thousands died, including Pericles himself. Battles raged on land and sea. Alliances shifted. Treachery spread. Athens launched a bold campaign to conquer Sicily, but it ended in catastrophe. Their fleet was destroyed, their army slaughtered. Sparta, with help from Persia, ironically, built a navy, and in 404 BC, they broke through Athens' walls. The city surrendered, its empire collapsed, and democracy fell silent. The Peloponnesian War left Greece exhausted, cities were ruined, crops burned, trust destroyed. Sparta emerged victorious, but not for long. New powers rose. Old alliances faded. The Greek world had torn itself apart. Its golden age was gone. But even in this shattered land, destiny had one more hero to call forth. A young prince from Macedon, a student of Aristotle, a man who would conquer the world. In the next chapter, we meet Alexander the Great. In 356 BC, in the kingdom of Macedon, a boy was born. His father was a king. His mother claimed descent from Achilles. His teacher was Aristotle. His name was Alexander. By the time he died at just 32 years old, he had conquered the known world. This is the story of a man who became a myth. Alexander was just 20 when his father, Philip II, was assassinated. He inherited a powerful army and an unfinished dream to conquer Persia. He began by crushing revolts in Greece, then turned east, toward the greatest empire on earth. At Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, Alexander outwitted and overwhelmed the mighty Persian forces. The Persian king Darius III fled. Alexander pursued, relentless. City after city fell: Babylon, Susa, Persepolis. The heart of Persia was his, but he didn't stop. In Egypt, he was welcomed as a liberator and declared a god. He founded a city in his name, Alexandria. Then he marched into India, across rivers and jungles, clashing with war elephants and unknown kingdoms. His men, exhausted, finally begged him to turn back, and he did, but not for long. Alexander dreamed of uniting East and West. He married Persian nobility, encouraged his men to do the same, created a blended empire, ruled not by race, but by loyalty. But in 323 BC, in the city of Babylon, he fell ill and died. Some say poison, others disease. No one truly knows. His empire, too vast and too fast, fractured after his death. His generals carved it into pieces. But the world was never the same. Greek language, art, and philosophy spread across continents. From Egypt to India, Alexander left behind more than cities. He left a new world. In the next chapter, we explore that legacy, how Greece continued to shape civilization long after its fall. Greece fell, but its ideas did not. For centuries after the last city-states crumbled, the world kept thinking like the Greeks. Their language became the language of scholarship. Their philosophy shaped the way we question truth. Their science, mathematics, and art still echo in classrooms, laboratories, and temples today. Greek words fill our modern world: democracy, history, philosophy, biology, theater. Their epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, inspired entire literary traditions. Their dramas explored fate, justice, and morality before psychology even existed. The questions of Socrates, the ideals of Plato, the logic of Aristotle, these weren't just ideas. They became the foundation of Western thought. Every time we ask why, seek meaning, or argue with reason, we speak in the voice of Greece. Greeks measured the stars. They calculated the Earth's circumference, invented levers, pumps, and early computers. Thinkers like Archimedes, Hippocrates, and Pythagoras moved knowledge forward, not through faith, but by observation. They did not always get it right, but they dared to question, and from those questions came revolutions. Rome adopted Greek culture and spread it further. The Renaissance resurrected Greek ideas. Modern democracy, science, literature, and law all carry their imprint. The Greeks didn't just build monuments, they built the intellectual architecture of the modern world. In the final chapter, we return to where we started, not in conquest or gods or glory, but in remembrance. What does it mean that a civilization long buried still defines who we are? Join us for the final reflection. Thousands of years have passed. The temples have crumbled. The statues have weathered. The names, sometimes forgotten, but the echoes remain. Every time we walk into a courtroom, or cast a vote, or ask what is truth, we walk in the footsteps of the Greeks. They taught us that knowledge begins with a question, that beauty matters, that power must be challenged, that gods reflect us, and we reflect them. They made war, they made art, they made mistakes, and they made history. From the fires of Troy to the stones of the Parthenon, from the ink of Plato to the conquests of Alexander, the Greeks did not merely exist, they transformed the world. In their triumphs and their tragedies, we see ourselves. That is the real legacy of ancient Greece. Not marble, not myths, but a mirror. This has been Echoes of the Ancient, and this was the story of the Greeks. If you enjoyed this journey through ancient Greece, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More lost empires, forgotten kings, and ancient truths await only on Echoes of the Ancient.